This is going to be fun. Let's talk about what we want to see from the new Batman game. So this is, to be fair, we are not saying what will happen. We're not saying this is what they're doing. This is leaks. This is rumors about
Yeah.
what side. This is like if we could get whatever game we want from W Montreal on the Batman game, or whatever features we want from Rocksteady Suicide Squad game, what characters would we have? What would the map look like? What would the gameplay look like? I will start very briefly. Let's talk about the new Batman game. I think that one of the biggest things they need to do is expand the map, because looking back on it, for whatever reason, I was very excited about the size of the Arkham Knight map. But then you replay the game and you're like, okay, you can actually traverse this map in about 90 seconds
Yeah.
by flight or by Batmobile. So the world is not very big, unless you're doing a glitch to glitch out of the map and fly over to Arkham Asylum or Arkham City. The map is quite contained and quite limited. So I think that they really need to work on that. They need to borrow from Grand Theft Auto of what does a real city feel like, a city that feels lived in. I've seen a lot of people say, well, it's not that important to me that we have civilians in the game. I could not disagree more,
Yep.
because we need to actually feel like what is it like to be in Gotham? What is it like to live in this world? We've not gotten an authentic Gotham in any of these games yet. And for, Arkham City, they wrote an explanation and the story Paul Dini
Mhm.
did as to why that's okay and why we can be okay with that. But in this game, I think there's no excuse. And looking
Or
at Arkham
Origins
Knight,
either.
yeah, or Origins, it really was a little disappointing looking back on the map of Arkham Knight, and really it's not very impressive. Graphically, it's impressive, because the map looks great. And the other thing about Rocksteady that they do so well is with like even the DLC. You'll see these 10, 15-minute DLCs in Arkham Knight, and the level design, the intricacies of like how everything looks, how the map and the world looks is phenomenal. Even that Robin DLC with like the way the courthouse looks is so good.
Yeah.
Even though the DLC is terrible, but it still looks great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the way the colors work and just all that. So I think that they need to apply that philosophy to the world and think like, all right, if Gotham is a city, what does it look like? Where are the apartments? Where do people live? Where do people like walk? Where are the restaurants?
That's a good
Look,
point. And like in
go back
Arkham
and
City,
look at
I
Arkham
fully
Knight. The
believed.
map is
I
empty.
fully believed it was in like abandoned portion of the city. Like it looks like at one point someone could have lived there. Arkham Knight, I have no idea like how just the layout was so bizarre. I have no idea how anybody could live there.
Yeah, it's like here's a shipping yard, here's this like random hospital. But when you look around, it's like there are no houses. There's no like where do people live? Where do people work? Where is
Yeah.
like where's the grocery store? You know what I mean? It
Hmm.
doesn't make any sense. And when you look at a game like Grand Theft Auto, you might think like, well, it's really, it's immersion breaking to have a grocery store. It's immersion breaking to have like a CVS. But it's like it's not convincing when you're driving around this world and then you look into the skyline all around you in the Arkham Knight map. You see all of these other skyscrapers. You see this world that potentially could be inhabitable. And then you look to these three islands and you just think, once again, I mean, this doesn't even feel like a real city. It feels like whatever, it's contrived and that type of thing. So
Yep.
that's my main thing there. Another point I'll make is with playable characters, I really think that we need to have more of a control over Robin, being able to play as Robin, being able to play as Batgirl. I would like to see Barbara Gordon be Batgirl as opposed to Oracle. So I'd like to have Alfred on the intercom in this game, and then Barbara Gordon be playable. I also think it would be ideal to be able to switch between those characters, kind of like we saw with The Last of Us 2, where it's like, okay, we're playing as
Yeah.
Batman for a couple hours. It's like, oh, Batgirl's all the way over here. She's dealing with this other thing that Batman and Robin can't get to for whatever reason, and she's all alone. Or like Batgirl is, 50 miles away in Arkham Asylum, and she's stuck there alone, and it's like this own thing. It's an aside from the main plot that's going on, and then they reconvene later, that type of thing. So it'd be very interesting to see that. I would like to see more in terms of the story. My main thing with this game, and I'm kind of boiling these things down to like one thing. So like with the map, it needs to be larger, and it needs to be um, it needs to be more convincing of like a real city, like a Grand Theft Auto type of map. In terms of the playable characters, we need to have more integration and solo gameplay of like you're just playing as Batgirl, you're just playing as Robin. So in that way, it is a Gotham Knights game as opposed to a Batman game, which I think would be incredible to see. In terms of the gameplay, I think that I would like to see multiple usable vehicles. So as I said, if the world is much larger, we can have the Batwing in addition to the Batmobile, and the Batmobile and the Batbike essentially function the same way. We should have that too. So I would be in favor of having all three of those vehicles. That's the main thing I'd like to see improve the gameplay. Arkham Knight, if I'm being honest, Arkham Knight has like perfect gameplay. The
Yeah, it
gameplay in
does.
Arkham Knight is so good. And when you're free roaming and you're like doing the Batmobile assisted takedowns, when you're doing those combos, they have so many different combos. And when your meter's full, the combo animation is different. You can take out a bunch of different dudes. I mean, it's smooth, it's free flowing, it feels great, the animations look great. Of course, they're going to tweak and add new gadgets, new abilities. I'm in favor of adding more gadgets. Spider-Man PS4 had more gadgets than Arkham Knight, so I'm in favor of adding 5, 10 extra gadgets. That's totally fine with me. But I think that the combat and gameplay is already perfect. The main way I'd improve the gameplay is by making the map larger. You also increase traversal, the need for traversal, and that would incorporate certainly the Batwing, and the Batmobile and the Batbike. So that's the main thing I would do there. Playable characters, touched on that. The main thing that I think is the most important, I'll end on this for the story as the final category to touch on. With the story, I really need to see more character moments between the characters and more civilian moments with the characters, like Barbara Gordon. She's a librarian, and like those types of scenes, or Barbara Gordon hanging out with Jim Gordon. That certainly amplifies, like when Jim Gordon or Barbara Gordon gets kidnapped, you feel for them more if you have those scenes. And I would really borrow quite closely from what Spider-Man PS4 did, Insomniac, in 2017. I thought that was 2018. I thought that was very well done, where you got to hang out with Feast with Aunt May, and you got to hang out with Miles, and just walk around New York City with Miles. I would certainly have scenes like that, and really being able to hang out as Barbara Gordon with Jim Gordon, being able to hang out even as Bruce and Robin, and hang out in the Batcave and have like scripted CGI scenes, motion cap scenes. So we got a little bit of that in Origins, very little of that in Night. I would increase that many, many times to basically have this be more of a cinematic type of experience that focuses probably less on the plot of the villain and what the villain is trying to achieve, and focus a lot more on our heroes and our characters and the relationships between them, and particularly the drama between them. To create it, like I said, like The Last of Us 1, it is the relationships between Bruce Wayne and Robin as a fatherly figure. If there was a whole game based around just that, that'd be incredible. It could be one of the best video games ever made. It could be like, wow, this is just as impactful as The Last of Us 1. Much more impactful than chasing around, villains in like, oh, Penguin is stealing weapons, and then Two-Face is robbing a bank. Let's go stop them. It's just kind of like, okay, it's a comic book game. I get we're gonna have some of that in side missions, but I love to see a more impactful story there. So those are the main pillars. If you want to comment on each of those main pillars and like the main one thing you think they need to improve, I think we'll structure it like that.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I'll start with gameplay as well. I think that gameplay, for me, I agree with everything that you said. One thing that I would like them to do a huge overhaul of is stealth. I think that it worked really well in Asylum.
Yes.
And with each game, it's gotten progressively worse because each game gets a little bit bigger. And that stealth system, you can only improve it so much. I would love to make stealth really difficult. And that's one thing. I think that it would be more fulfilling if the combat and stealth were a bit more tricky. And another thing, and this goes for the story and side content as well, but one thing that I noticed is like Arkham City, I think, is a perfect game for its time. For 2011, it was a perfect Batman game. By today's standards, I think it's still really, really good, but we're seeing games like Spider-Man and Arkham Knight come out, and they have pretty much comparable content. And they're making like these huge open worlds and these huge, like tons and tons of things to do, but there's not necessarily tons of fun things to do with them. Like once you've completed the content in Spider-Man, you're kind of just stuck swinging around and fighting the occasional crime. So I would add like maybe a nemesis system, and I would also maybe add. I'd also like to add, if they do more like Bruce Wayne gameplay, and I would have liked to see this in Spider-Man. At some point, I'll either do a video or talk at some point about something that I would have really integrated with Spider-Man. But like if they want to go a direction where you're playing as like Bruce Wayne, I think it would be interesting if they did kind of a Mass Effect type thing where it's like not a full on Telltale experience where you're like changing the plot or anything, but
Right.
letting the player have some interaction with those characters and maybe have optional objectives as Bruce Wayne where it's like you can go meet with the mayor or you can go finance a specific like you can maybe go invest money into Arkham Asylum and then it decreases the chance of a breakout from a thug with like via the Nemesis system.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think that if
cool.
they played around with things like that, that would be cool. In terms of graphics, I definitely expect it to be a pretty big step up from Night. Night still looks great, but I mean, The Last of Us 2, I think
Night
is
looks great.
it does. It really does. But I think like Last of Us 2 is setting a new standard. Some games won't look that good for a while. Granted, that's just Naughty Dog is very ahead graphically in everything they do. Uh, but I think that especially because it won't be as big as something like Red Dead 2, I don't think that looking at graphics that look on that level would be unreasonable. In terms of the story, I honestly, the longer that I've waited for a new Batman game, the more I've thought I kind of prefer them to almost do a reboot at this point. Um, Arkham is great, but they kind of wrote themselves into a lot of corners. There's a lot of things that you can't do in that universe. It almost would be better if they just started from scratch again, and let Warner Brothers Games Montreal really fulfill their own vision. I'd
Yeah.
like to see a story that's much longer, but not filler heavy, if that makes sense. Like I'd like to play an
Yep.
Arkham game that's like, 15, 20 hours long, but where it feels more like Arkham City rather than Arkham Knight, where I just continually
Yes.
got bored of the game.
You make a great
Um,
point. Like
yeah,
remember in Night where they have those towers and you spend like an hour disabling those towers
it's
so
ridiculous.
that the Batwing can fly in, I think is why you disable the
There's
towers.
there's so many things in that game that are just so uninteresting. Like, oh, we have to go find plants for poison ivy, or like oh, we have to follow these tire tracks, and something even that boring and basic. Like they have to interject every 2 seconds. Like, oh, now Riddler just captured Catwoman. Oh, now the Arkham Knight is planting bombs everywhere. Like they can't even stick to something that boring, and it ends up
Yes.
feeling really filler heavy.
You make a great point. And when you compare the Arkham Knight story to Arkham City, I think there's the same amount of like the story is of the same depth. In other words, Arkham Knight could have been a 6 hour game. The way it was
Yeah.
a 12-hour game is just all through AGLs, like artificial
Yep.
game lengtheners. They're like you said, oh, track down the tires and analyze the tire tracks and follow them around the entire map. And uh, doing all these silly things. But I think when you combine all of the cutscenes of just like, what's the story? Who is the Arkham Knight? Who
It's
is the
very
Scarecrow? What is he
basic.
trying to do? It's even more basic than Arkham City. Arkham City had
Yeah.
a much more complicated plot with Hugo Strange and Ra's al Ghul. What are they doing? What is the Joker doing? How does the Joker fit into this? All the villains are fighting each other. There's none of that going on in this game. There's none of those like none of that is true. And then there's like Protocol 10. What is Protocol 10? What are they going to do? And who is behind it? And there's so many plot intricacies to that game. And this game, it's almost like the plot is it does a lot less in double the amount of time, and so I think you make a great point there about the length of the game being more, but it all being warranted by actually having more meat to the story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that the bottom line for what I'd like to see in this game is the my biggest issue in retrospect with the Arkham games is that they really are they like I don't know, Arkham Asylum and Arkham City I think really did push games and especially superhero games forward. Arkham Origins was just a copy and paste of City pretty much, and Arkham Knight almost felt that one to me, I don't know. It's kind of hard because it wasn't outdated at the time, but I will say that it feels like that one has aged way more poorly than the other ones did for me. And I think that the reasoning for that is that really like you look at it and the game is very limited. It's like, okay, you have your campaign and you have your set side missions and that's it. And then you look at a game, and again, this isn't a fair comparison, but a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, because the new Batman game is not going to be that scale. It's not. They don't have a development team that big. They haven't been working on this iteration of the game that long. But the thing that I like about that game is you can play with that open world for like 20 hours before you start to feel a little bit fatigued. And that's not even talking about story content. Like you can go around and you can just do fun little things in the world. You can go like play card games and gamble, or you can go and collect bounties, you can go hunt animals. Like there's so many different things you can do. And I would love for superhero games to start looking at that and like, okay, what's some fun Bruce Wayne gameplay that we could do? Like,
Right.
what can we make characters like, who could we have Bruce Wayne interact with that would be interesting? And, you know, like also with a nemesis system, like I would love a Batman game where I really feel like I can go out and just choose what I want to do as that character. And if they added some more layers of gameplay, like I mentioned this in a previous podcast, like you put on like a heavier bat suit and you move slightly slower, or you put
Right.
on a lighter one and you move slightly faster, and then you can really think like Batman. Like you'll learn of situations um beforehand. Like you'll get a briefing on like, okay, you have to go fight Bane, and then you have to like prepare as the player to fight Bane, and maybe you can go do some investigation work to figure out what his strengths and weaknesses are and then prey upon that. And I don't know, we're getting to the point where that's very possible, and I don't think it would be that difficult to implement features like that, but it would go a really long way in terms of replayability and lasting appeal. So that's kind of what I'd push for this game, because I think the Arkham games are great, and I don't think that they should throw out everything that the Arkham games did. But I would love to see a huge evolution in, combat, in gameplay, in just variety
Yes.
of traversal content, creating automated side mission systems so that you can have
Yes.
different side missions pop up, so that you can kind of have that Mass Effect choice system as Bruce Wayne. Yeah, I think that there's so much that they
Right.
could do.
Well, and not even side missions. It's also just what happens in the open world. I think
Yep.
back to Arkham City, the extent of random things that can happen in the world is like somebody gets mugged, and this guy is like getting robbed, like some news reporter or some random person, and you swoop in, you save them, and then that's it. In Batman Arkham Knight, there are police chases where these cop cars are chasing around other cars, and you can go in and stop the police chase and basically take the guy out.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. There will be guys walking around that you can beat up, just randomly walking on the street. You can just swoop down and beat those guys up. Spider-Man PS4, there are these outposts, and you can stop people on outposts where those outposts, you can go in and break them up. Same thing with Arkham Knight. Looking at these superhero games, the open world is fairly limited and fairly undeveloped.
Yeah.
I think they spend a lot of time on the main story. They spend a lot of time on the gameplay, perfecting the gameplay. But compared to a game like Grand Theft Auto 5, where
Yep.
anything can happen, like you'll just be walking on the street and some random dude will just want to fight you. And it's like for no reason. It just happens. And that type of thing, like how can you apply that same idea of random things where you're free roaming in the open world and so many random things happen, unpredictable things that make it fun? And how many hours can that last? And if
Yeah.
they do the open world, if they do it well, it'll be more than just like, oh, these guys are walking around, you can beat those guys up even after you beat the game. And it'll be more than like, oh, you can help with the police chase. It'll be more advanced, kind of like what you're saying, where there'll be so many different elements that you can control, and there are so many different things that you can encounter, literally like hundreds and hundreds of situations where you're not hearing the same lines over and over again, where it's like, it's the freaking bat, and it's like the
Yeah.
same thing every time you beat up those guys. It's like
Yeah.
every situation's different. They say different things to you, and they approach you in a different way. Some of them like run away, and some of them pull out guns. And just so many different things that they can do. And I get really excited thinking about Batgirl and Robin being implemented more in this game and seeing more of them. It's always the Arkham series is very Batman and Joker centric. It's all about the relationship and the duality of those two characters. That's what all four games fundamentally are about at their core. And I'm very interested to see if they can evolve that to be more about Bruce's relationship with his allies as opposed to his relationship with the Joker, because they explored that so well, especially in City. I've seen that and I feel comfortable with what they did with that. And I think they couldn't even top it if they tried. So
Yeah.
I hope they avoid the Joker and they actually, of course, we still want the Court of Owls. Like we want that great plot and that great exchange with our villains. And Batman is known for his rogues gallery. It's his biggest strength. It's why he's as popular and famous as he is as a character. But I also feel like if they shift that direction more towards a Last of Us 1 type direction where it's all about our bond with our allies, it can be even stronger. So
you just listened to a clip from the podcast, the Anonymous Throwdown podcast, where every week we talk about the latest in video games, the new Batman game, new Suicide Squad game, but also The Last of Us 2 and other games and other movies and DC Comics and Marvel Comics and all that fun stuff. So if you're into that type of thing, if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll enjoy the podcast. In this week's episode, Jake and I reviewed The Last of Us 2. We also discuss other topics in the realm of DC Comics and DC video games. We talk about the Rocksteady Suicide Squad game and other topics you guys might be interested in. So this is just a brief segment from it. This is 20 minutes out of over an hour and a half. So definitely go and check out the full show. I will put the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to the Anonymous Throwdown podcast, turn on notifications, and every single Sunday, we go live with an episode. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. My name is Slickmoff. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.